The smell of burnt coffee and grease hung in the air like it did every Tuesday morning. Rachel wiped down the same sticky table for the third time, her lower back aching from the double shift she'd pulled the night before. The clock on the wall read 2:47 p.m., and the lunch rush had finally died down to just a few stragglers nursing their drinks and scrolling through their phones. She'd been working at Joe's Diner for 3 years now. Ever since her mom got sick, the medical bills had piled up faster than she could count, and even after her mom passed away 6 months ago, the debt collectors wouldn't stop calling. 26 years old and she felt 40, working herself to the bone just to keep her head above water. The bell above the door chimed, pulling her from her thoughts. An old man shuffled in, and Rachel couldn't help but notice how tired he looked. His jacket was worn at the elbows, the kind of wear that comes from years of use, not fashion. His shoes had seen better days too, scuffed and faded. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They looked sad, really sad, like someone who'd lost something precious and couldn't find their way back. He made his way slowly to a corner booth, the one by the window that nobody really liked because the vinyl was cracked and the table wobbled. Rachel grabbed a menu and headed over, putting on her best smile. After all these years, she'd gotten good at smiling even when she felt like crying. "Good afternoon," she said warmly. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" The old man looked up at her, and for a moment she saw something flicker in his eyes. "Gratitude, maybe?" "Just coffee would be wonderful, dear," he said softly. His voice was gentle, the kind that reminded her of her grandfather who used to tell her bedtime stories. "Coming right up," Rachel replied, heading back to grab the pot. She poured him a steaming cup and brought it over with some creamers and sugar packets. "Do you know what you'd like to eat, or do you need a few more minutes?" He studied the menu carefully, his fingers trembling slightly as he held it. After what felt like forever, he set it down and looked up at her with an apologetic expression. "I'm terribly sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I seem to have forgotten my wallet at home." "I don't suppose I could just have the coffee?" "I promise I'll come back tomorrow and pay for it." Rachel looked at him for a long moment. She could see the embarrassment coloring his cheeks the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. She'd been there herself, counting pennies at the grocery store, putting things back when she realized she didn't have enough. Pride was a funny thing. It hurt more than hunger sometimes. "Don't worry about it," she said, surprising herself with how quickly the words came out. "Coffee's on me today. And you know what? Let me get you some toast, too. You look like you could use something to eat." The old man's eyes widened, and for a second she thought he might cry. "That's very kind of you," he managed to say. "Very kind indeed." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Rachel said firmly. "Just sit tight, okay? I'll be right back with that toast." She walked back to the kitchen, ignoring the look her coworker gave her. Danny had been working at the diner longer than anyone, and he had opinions about everything. "You paying for customers again?" he asked, shaking his head. "Rach, you can barely afford your own rent." "It's just coffee and toast, Danny. It's not going to break me." She dropped 2 slices of bread into the toaster and waited, her mind wandering. Why had she done that? She really couldn't afford to be giving away free food, but something about that old man had tugged at her heart. Maybe it was the way he reminded her of her grandfather, or maybe she just knew what it felt like to be down on your luck. When the toast popped up, she buttered it generously and brought it out with some jam packets. The old man looked up as she approached, and the smile that spread across his face made her whole day feel lighter. "Thank you," he said, and she could hear the emotion in his voice. "You have no idea what this means to me." "It's just toast," Rachel said with a small laugh, trying to brush it off. But he reached out and gently touched her hand, his skin paper-thin and warm. "It's not just toast," he said seriously. "It's kindness. Real kindness. That's rarer than you might think." Something about the way he said it made her pause. She pulled out her order pad, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Well, you enjoy that. And if you need anything else, just wave me over." Over the next hour, Rachel went about her usual routine, refilling drinks and clearing tables, but she found herself glancing over at the old man more than once. He ate his toast slowly, savoring each bite like it was a gourmet meal. He sipped his coffee and stared out the window, watching people walk by with an expression she couldn't quite read. When her break came around, she grabbed her own cup of coffee and, on impulse, walked over to his table. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" she asked. "My feet are killing me." "Please," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "I'd enjoy the company." She slid into the booth, kicking off her shoes under the table. "I'm Rachel, by the way." "William," he replied, extending his hand. She shook it, noting how gentle his grip was. "You've worked here long?" "3 years," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. "Feels like longer sometimes, but it's not a bad job. The owner's decent and the customers are usually okay." "And what do you do when you're not here?" William asked, genuine curiosity in his eyes. Rachel shrugged. "Not much, honestly. I work a lot, trying to pay off some debts." She didn't know why she was telling him this, but something about William made her want to talk. "My mom passed away last year, and the medical bills were pretty rough. I'm just trying to get through it, you know?" William nodded slowly, his expression sad but understanding. "I'm sorry for your loss. Losing someone we love is never easy." "Thanks," Rachel said softly. "What about you?" "Do you live around here?" "Not too far," William replied vaguely. "I've been walking around a lot lately, trying to figure some things out." "Everything okay?" Rachel asked, concerned. William smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Life gets complicated sometimes, even for an old man like me. But meeting kind people like you helps, more than you know." They talked for a few more minutes before Rachel's break ended. She stood up reluctantly, sliding her aching feet back into her shoes. "Well, it was nice talking to you, William. You take care of yourself, okay?" "I will," he promised. "And Rachel, thank you again, for everything." As she walked back to the counter, Danny caught her eye and rolled his. "Making friends with every sad soul that walks through that door," he muttered. "There are worse things to be known for," Rachel shot back. But she was smiling. When William finally stood to leave about 20 minutes later, he stopped by the counter where Rachel was ringing up another customer. He waited patiently until she was done, then leaned in slightly. "I meant what I said earlier," he told her quietly. "Your kindness today meant more than you could possibly understand. I won't forget it." Before she could respond, he squeezed her hand gently and headed for the door. She watched him go, something about the encounter leaving her feeling strange. Not bad strange, just different, like something had shifted in a way she couldn't quite explain. "Weird old guy," Danny commented from behind her. "He seemed nice," Rachel said, still watching the door even though William had already disappeared down the street. She went back to work, wiping down tables and taking orders, but her mind kept drifting back to William and the sadness in his eyes. She hoped wherever he was going he'd be okay. She hoped he'd remember to grab his wallet next time so he wouldn't be embarrassed again. As the sun started to set and the dinner crowd filtered in, Rachel found herself looking at the door every time the bell chimed, half expecting to see the old man shuffle back in, but he didn't come back that day. And as she locked up the diner that night, dead tired and ready to collapse into bed, she had no idea that the simple act of buying a stranger coffee and toast would change her life forever. Sometimes the smallest gestures plant the biggest seeds, and Rachel had just planted something that would grow in ways she never could have imagined. 2 days passed before Rachel saw William again. She'd thought about him more than once, wondering if he was okay, if he'd managed to sort out whatever was troubling him. When he walked through that door on Thursday morning, she felt an unexpected rush of relief. "Good morning," she called out as he made his way to the same corner booth. "Coffee?" "Please," William said, settling into his seat with a small sigh. "And Rachel, I brought my wallet today." She laughed as she poured his coffee. "I'm glad to hear it. But you know what? I was going to cover you again if you hadn't." Something in his expression softened. "You're a rare person, Rachel. A truly rare person." Over the next 2 weeks, William became a fixture at Joe's diner. He showed up 3 or 4 times a week, always in the same worn jacket, always ordering simple things. Coffee and toast. Sometimes oatmeal. Once scrambled eggs. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. And every single time, Rachel quietly paid his bill from her tip money before he could get to the register. She told herself it wasn't a big deal. A few dollars here and there wouldn't kill her, even though her bank account was already crying. But watching William's face light up when he saw her, hearing him say good morning in that gentle voice, it felt worth it somehow. He reminded her that there was still goodness in the world, even when everything felt heavy and dark. Danny thought she'd lost her mind. "That's like $50 you've spent on that old man," he said one afternoon while they were prepping for the dinner rush. $50 you don't have, might I add. "He's lonely," Rachel replied, slicing tomatoes. "And he's nice. When's the last time someone was just genuinely nice to you, Danny? No agenda, no expectations, just nice? Danny paused, his knife hovering over an onion. Fair point, he admitted grudgingly. But still, you're too soft for your own good. Maybe she was. But Rachel had learned from her mother that kindness wasn't about what you could afford. It was about what kind of person you wanted to be. And she wanted to be the kind of person who helped when she could, even in small ways. Her conversations with William became the highlight of her shifts. He was different from other customers. He actually listened when she talked, asked follow-up questions, seemed genuinely interested in her life. Most people just wanted their food fast and their coffee hot, but William wanted to know about her. How's the debt situation coming along? He asked one morning, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee cup. Rachel shrugged, trying to keep her tone light even though the topic made her stomach hurt. Slowly, I'm chipping away at it. Some months are better than others, you know. Right now, I'm just trying to keep the collection agencies from calling me at work. That must be incredibly stressful, William said, his brow furrowed with concern. It is what it is, Rachel replied, refilling his cup without being asked. I keep thinking about going back to school, maybe becoming a nurse like my mom was. But that costs money I don't have and time I definitely don't have. So for now, I'm here. Did you want to be a nurse? William asked. Or is that just because of your mother? The question caught her off guard. Nobody had ever asked her that before. Both, I think, she said slowly, thinking about it. I mean, I saw how much my mom loved helping people. Even when she was sick, she'd talk about her patients, worry about them. And I liked being able to help her, you know? Making her comfortable, making sure she had what she needed. It felt meaningful. William nodded, his eyes distant. Meaningful work is important. More important than most people realize. What did you do, William? Rachel asked, suddenly curious. Before you retired, I mean? He smiled, but something flickered across his face. Sadness, maybe, or regret. I worked in business, he said vaguely. Nothing very interesting. But I worked too much, I can tell you that. Missed a lot of things I shouldn't have missed. Like what? Rachel asked, sitting down across from him. The morning rush hadn't started yet, and Danny could handle the few customers they had. Time with my wife, William said quietly. She passed away last year. 53 years we were married, and I kept telling myself I'd slow down eventually. Spend more time with her. But I never did. Always one more meeting, one more deal, one more thing that seemed urgent at the time but doesn't matter at all now. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm so sorry, William. That must be really hard. It is, he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Some days are better than others. But I find myself thinking about legacy a lot these days. What did I really accomplish? Did I make the world better? Did I make anyone's life easier? Or did I just make money? Money's not nothing, Rachel pointed out. I mean, I'd love to have some of it. William laughed, a real laugh that made his whole face crinkle. You're right about that. But it's not everything either. There's a point where having more doesn't actually change your life. It just gives you more things to worry about. They talked for another 20 minutes before Rachel had to get back to work. But the conversation stayed with her all day. There was something about William that felt almost magical. Like he was teaching her lessons without actually teaching her anything at all. Just by being himself, by sharing his regrets and his wisdom, he was changing the way she saw things. The following week, something shifted. William showed up on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday like usual. But on Thursday, his booth stayed empty. Rachel kept glancing at the door, expecting to see him shuffle in at any moment. But he never did. Your boyfriend stood you up, Danny teased, noticing how often she checked the entrance. He's not my boyfriend. He's like 100 years old, Rachel shot back. But she couldn't hide her worry. I'm just concerned. What if something happened to him? He probably just had other things to do, Danny said reasonably. Old people have lives too, you know. But Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. William had become so consistent, so reliable. For him to just not show up felt strange. She realized with a start that she didn't even know his last name or where he lived or how to contact him. What if he'd fallen? What if he was sick? What if he'd died and nobody even knew to tell her? Friday came and went with no William. By Saturday, Rachel was genuinely anxious. She found herself making up stories in her head. Maybe he'd moved away. Maybe he'd decided to stop coming. Maybe she'd said something wrong and offended him somehow, though she couldn't think of what it might have been. Sunday was her day off. and she spent most of it cleaning her tiny apartment and trying not to think about William. But Monday morning, when she showed up for her shift at 6 a.m., she was already scanning the diner for him, even though she knew he never came that early. The morning dragged on forever. Rachel messed up 2 orders, something she almost never did because she was too distracted checking the door. Danny noticed and pulled her aside during a lull. "You're really worried about him, aren't you?" he asked, his voice gentler than usual. "Yeah," Rachel admitted. "I know it's stupid. He probably just had a busy week or whatever. But I can't help it. He seems so sad sometimes, Danny. What if he needed someone and nobody was there?" "That's not your responsibility," Danny said carefully. "You've been really kind to him, but you can't save everyone, Rach." "I know," she said, but her chest felt tight. "I know." The lunch rush started picking up, and Rachel forced herself to focus on work. She took orders, poured drinks, brought out plates of food, all on autopilot. Her mind was somewhere else entirely. And then, just after 2 o'clock, the bell above the door chimed. Rachel looked up from the coffee she was pouring and felt her whole body relax. William walked in, but he wasn't alone. A younger man in a sharp business suit walked beside him, carrying a leather briefcase and looking completely out of place among the worn booths and faded linoleum floors. William caught her eye and smiled, but there was something different about it. Something nervous, maybe, or excited. The suited man said something to him, and William nodded, then gestured toward Rachel. They walked over to the counter, and Rachel set down the coffee pot, her heart suddenly racing for reasons she couldn't explain. "William," she said, relief flooding her voice. "I was worried about you." "I'm sorry I haven't been by," William said. "I've had some things to take care of. Rachel, this is my attorney, James Peterson. I was wondering if we might speak with you privately during your break." "It's important, attorney?" Rachel's mind raced. Why would William need to bring his lawyer to the diner? Was he in some kind of trouble? Was she in trouble somehow? Sure, she managed to say, glancing at Danny, who was staring at them with his mouth slightly open. "Let me just check with my boss." Her manager, a grumpy man named Frank, who usually said no to everything, took one look at the expensive suit and immediately told Rachel to take her break. She grabbed her apron off and followed William and James to the back booth, her hands trembling slightly. As she slid into the seat across from them, William reached across the table and took her hand, just like he had that very first day. "Before we begin," he said softly, "I want you to know that everything I'm about to tell you is real. And it's happening because of who you are, Rachel, because of your kindness." Rachel swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. "Okay," she whispered. "You're kind of scaring me, William." He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Don't be scared. I promise this is a good thing. A very good thing." James opened his briefcase, and Rachel's life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. Rachel stared at the papers James was pulling from his briefcase, her mind spinning with possibilities. None of them made sense. Why would William need his lawyer here? Why was everyone being so mysterious? She glanced at the door, half wondering if she should just excuse herself and run. "Rachel," William began, his voice gentle but serious. "I haven't been completely honest with you. Not about who I am." Her stomach dropped. Oh God, was he some kind of criminal? Was she somehow involved in something illegal by paying for his meals? Her mother had always warned her about being too trusting. William must have seen the panic on her face because he quickly continued. "Nothing bad, I promise. Let me start from the beginning." He took a deep breath, his weathered hands clasped together on the table. "My full name is William Thornton, and I'm the founder of Thornton Industries." Rachel blinked. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. "I'm sorry, I don't really know what that is." James spoke up for the first time, his voice professional but kind. "Thornton Industries is one of the largest manufacturing companies in the country. We produce components for everything from automobiles to medical equipment. The company employs over 40,000 people." The words weren't really sinking in. Rachel looked at William, at his worn jacket and scuffed shoes, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. "But you look like you're struggling to afford coffee," she said bluntly. William smiled sadly. "That was intentional. Let me explain." He leaned back, his eyes distant as if looking into the past. "When my wife died last year, something inside me broke. We'd been married for over 50 years and suddenly I was alone. Really alone. And I started looking around at my life, at the people in it, and I realized something terrible. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Nobody genuinely cared about me. They cared about my money, my influence, what I could do for them. Every conversation was calculated. Every friendship had an agenda. I'd built this empire and accumulated all this wealth, but I couldn't name a single person who'd be kind to me if I had nothing. Rachel felt her throat tighten. The sadness she'd seen in William's eyes that first day suddenly made perfect sense. So I decided to test something, William continued. I started dressing down, looking like someone who'd fallen on hard times. I visited different places around the city, seeing how people treated someone they thought had nothing to offer them. And, Rachel asked quietly, though she had a feeling she knew the answer. It was worse than I imagined, William said, his voice heavy. I was ignored, dismissed, treated with contempt. One restaurant literally told me to leave because I didn't look like I could afford their food. A young man at a coffee shop laughed at me when I said I'd forgotten my wallet. People looked right through me like I was invisible. He reached across the table and took Rachel's hand again. And then I walked into Joe's diner, and you saw me. Not as someone beneath you, not as an inconvenience, but as a human being who needed help. You gave me your own money you desperately needed yourself, without hesitation, without judgment. Rachel felt tears starting to form. I just bought you coffee, William. It wasn't anything special. That's where you're wrong, William said firmly. It was everything. You didn't just buy me coffee. You treated me with dignity. You sat with me, talked to me, listened to my stories. You made me feel human again when I'd almost forgotten what that felt like. James pulled out a document from the briefcase. Mr. Thornton has asked me to prepare some paperwork, he said gently. Rachel, I need to ask you something. How much debt are you currently carrying from your mother's medical bills? The question caught her completely off guard. She looked at William, confused. I don't understand. Why does that matter? Please, William said. Just tell us. Rachel's face flushed with embarrassment. She hated talking about money, especially amounts that big. Around $78,000, she whispered. Give or take. William nodded slowly, then looked at James. Show her. James slid a document across the table. Rachel's eyes scanned the page, but the legal language was dense and confusing. She caught words like payment in full and debt forgiveness, but couldn't make sense of how they connected. I don't understand what I'm looking at, she admitted. This is a payment authorization, James explained. If you sign it, Mr. Thornton will pay off your mother's medical debt in full. All of it. You'll be completely free of that burden. The words seemed to come from very far away. Rachel stared at the paper, then at William, then back at the paper. I don't understand, she repeated. Why would you do that? Because you gave me something infinitely more valuable than money, William said, his eyes bright with emotion. You gave me hope. You reminded me that good people still exist. That kindness isn't dead, it's just rare, and that kind of gift deserves to be repaid. Rachel's hands were shaking. $78,000 gone just like that. It was impossible. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. William, I can't accept this. It's too much. Way too much. You can and you will, William said with a gentle stubbornness. But that's not all. There's more. Rachel's voice came out as barely a squeak. James pulled out another folder. Mr. Thornton would also like to establish a trust fund for your education. If you still want to become a nurse, this will cover your tuition, books, and living expenses for the duration of your nursing program. You won't have to work while you study unless you choose to. The tears that had been threatening finally spilled over. Rachel put her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. This couldn't be real. She was going to wake up any second in her cramped apartment, late for work and still drowning in debt. Breathe, dear, William said softly. I know it's overwhelming. Overwhelming? Rachel looked up, tears streaming down her face. William, this is insane. I bought you toast. This is like winning the lottery because I was nice one time. You weren't nice one time, William corrected her. You were nice every single time I walked through that door. You paid for my meals from your tips. Tips you earned working double shifts to pay off debt. You sat with me on your breaks when your feet hurt and you were exhausted. You asked about my life and actually cared about the answers. You treated me like family when you had no reason to. He leaned forward, his voice intense. Rachel, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What good is it doing sitting in a bank? But changing your life, giving you the chance to pursue your dreams. Helping you become the nurse I know you'll be. That money finally means something. Rachel wiped her eyes, trying to process everything. I don't know what to say. Say yes, William said simply. Let an old man do something good with his wealth. Let me prove that money can be used for kindness too. There's one more thing, James interjected, pulling out a final document. And this one, Mr. Thornton would like you to think about carefully before deciding. William's expression grew more serious. I want to create a foundation, a charitable organization that helps people in the healthcare field who are struggling with medical debt while caring for others. People like you, Rachel, who dedicate their lives to helping people but end up drowning in bills when their own families get sick. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I want to call it the Rachel Mitchell Compassion Fund, and I want you to help run it. Rachel's mind went blank. What? You'd be the director, William explained. You'd help decide who receives assistance, how much, what kind of support they need. You understand these struggles firsthand. You know what it's like to choose between paying rent and paying medical bills. Your voice, your experience, that's invaluable. But I don't know anything about running a foundation, Rachel protested. I barely finished community college. I work at a diner. We'll teach you everything you need to know, James assured her. You'll have support staff, advisors, resources. Mr. Thornton isn't asking you to do this alone. I'm asking you to be the heart of it, William said. The foundation can have all the money in the world, but without someone who truly understands and cares, it's just another organization. You're that heart, Rachel. She looked down at the papers spread across the table, her vision blurry with tears. This morning she'd woken up worried about making rent. Now someone was telling her she'd have no debt, could go to school and would run a charitable foundation. It was too much, too big, too impossible. Why me? She asked, her voice breaking. Really, William, why me? I'm sure there are better people, people with education and experience and connections. William was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. Because when you saw someone who looked broken and alone, your first instinct was kindness. Not judgment, not pity, not indifference. Kindness, that's not something you can teach, Rachel. That's who you are at your core. And that's exactly who should be in charge of helping people. Rachel looked at him, this man she'd thought was struggling, who turned out to be one of the wealthiest people in the country. But beneath all of that, he was just William. Lonely, grieving, searching for meaning. And somehow, inexplicably, he'd found it in her. Okay, she whispered, okay. William leaned forward, hope lighting up his face. Okay, Rachel said more firmly, even though her hands were still shaking. Yes, I'll do it, all of it. I don't know how, but I'll figure it out. William stood up and came around the table, pulling Rachel into a hug. She hugged him back, the strange guardian angel who'd walked into her life disguised as someone in need. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving an old man hope again. Thank you for seeing something in me I didn't see in myself, Rachel replied. When they finally pulled apart, James was smiling too. I'll need you to sign these documents, he said, laying them out. Take your time, read everything. Ask any questions you need to. As Rachel picked up the first page, her hands still trembling, she looked up at William one more time. I'm still not sure this is real. It's real, William promised. And it's just the beginning. Rachel sat at her kitchen table that night staring at the copies of the documents James had given her. She'd read them at least 20 times and they still didn't feel real. Every time she blinked, she expected them to disappear like some kind of magic trick. Her phone buzzed. It was Danny. Did you seriously just quit? His text read, Frank is losing his mind. She'd almost forgotten about that part. After signing all the papers with William and James, she'd walked back into the diner in a daze. Frank had asked if everything was okay, and somehow the words had just tumbled out. I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice. Except then, William had gently suggested she didn't need to work those 2 weeks if she didn't want to, and the next thing she knew, she was taking off her apron for the last time. It's complicated, she typed back. I'll explain later. How could she explain? She barely understood it herself. One morning, she was a broke waitress drowning in debt, and by afternoon, she was debt-free with a full scholarship and a job running a charitable foundation. It was the kind of story people wouldn't believe even if she told them. Rachel stood up and walked to her tiny bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror. Same tired eyes, same face. But something was different now. For the first time in years, she didn't look afraid. The constant knot of anxiety in her stomach had loosened. She could breathe. Her phone rang, making her jump. It was a number she didn't recognize. Hello? Rachel, it's William. I hope I'm not calling too late. No, not at all, she said, pressing the phone to her ear. I'm just sitting here trying to convince myself today actually happened. William's laugh was warm. I had a feeling you might be struggling with that. I wanted to check on you. These kinds of changes can be jarring. Jarring is one word for it, Rachel said, sinking onto her worn couch. William, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you sure about all this, about me? Because I keep thinking you're going to realize you made a mistake and take it all back. Rachel, William said firmly, I've made many mistakes in my 78 years. This isn't one of them. I've never been more certain of anything. But what if I mess up? What if I'm not good at running a foundation? What if I let you down? Then we'll figure it out together, William replied. You think I knew what I was doing when I started my company? I was terrified. But I learned. And you will too. The difference is you won't be alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. Rachel felt her throat tighten with emotion. Why are you so nice to me? Because you were nice to me when you had no reason to be, William said simply. And because I see in you the daughter I never had. If that's not too presumptuous to say, tears slipped down Rachel's cheeks. It's not presumptuous. It's really sweet. They talked for another hour, William patiently answering all her anxious questions. When they finally hung up, Rachel felt steadier. Scared still, but steadier. The next few weeks passed in a blur. James helped her navigate the legal paperwork for the debt payoff. The first time Rachel checked her credit report and saw all those accounts marked paid in full, she cried for 20 minutes straight. The weight that had been crushing her for years was simply gone. William insisted on taking her shopping for professional clothes, since she'd be meeting with potential donors and board members. Rachel had protested, but William was surprisingly stubborn for such a gentle person. They spent an afternoon at stores Rachel had never even dared to enter before, and William sat patiently while she tried on outfit after outfit, giving his opinion like a proud father. That one makes you look confident, he'd say. Or, the blue brings out your eyes. It was strange and wonderful, and sometimes Rachel had to excuse herself to the bathroom just to process how surreal her life had become. She started nursing school in September. Walking into that first class, sitting down with her brand new textbooks, knowing she didn't have to rush off to a shift afterward, felt like stepping into someone else's life. The other students complained about tuition and work schedules, and Rachel stayed quiet, guilt mixing with gratitude. But running the foundation was where the real work began. James had set up an office in a modest building downtown, nothing too fancy, which Rachel appreciated. She had 2 assistants, both kind women who were patient with her constant questions. The first grant application that landed on her desk made her cry. A nurse named Betty, who'd worked in pediatric oncology for 20 years, was drowning in bills after her husband's cancer treatment. Even with insurance, the costs had destroyed them. Betty had written her request by hand, her handwriting shaky, apologizing for asking but not knowing what else to do. Rachel approved her request immediately. $50,000 to wipe out Betty's medical debt. Just like that. She called Betty personally to tell her, and the sound of the woman sobbing with relief on the other end of the line made everything real in a way nothing else had. Thank you, Betty kept saying. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You saved my life. Someone saved mine, Rachel replied. I'm just passing it forward. By the end of the first month, the Rachel Mitchell Compassion Fund had helped 37 healthcare workers. By the end of 3 months, they'd helped over 200. Word was spreading, and applications poured in from all over the country. William visited the office every Tuesday, always bringing coffee and pastries. He'd sit with Rachel and review applications, offering advice but never overruling her decisions. He trusted her judgment completely, which somehow made her want to be even more careful and thoughtful with every choice. One Tuesday, William arrived with someone new. A woman in her 40s, professionally dressed, with kind eyes that reminded Rachel of her mother. Rachel, this is Dr. Patricia Chen. William introduced them. She's a trauma surgeon who's been following our foundation's work. She has an idea she wanted to discuss with you. They sat in Rachel's office, and Dr. Chen pulled out a folder. I work at County General, she began, and I see so many medical professionals who are burning out. not just from the work but from their own financial stress. I was wondering if the foundation might consider expanding beyond debt relief. What did you have in mind? Rachel asked, leaning forward. Mental health support. Counseling services specifically for healthcare workers dealing with financial trauma, because the debt might be gone. But the anxiety, the fear, the stress patterns, those don't disappear overnight. Rachel felt something click into place. She knew exactly what Dr. Chen meant. Even with her debt paid off, she still woke up sometimes in a panic, thinking she'd missed a payment. Old fears died hard. Yes, Rachel said immediately. Absolutely yes. How do we make this happen? Over the next hour, they sketched out a plan. The foundation would partner with therapists who specialized in financial trauma and anxiety, covering the cost of sessions for anyone they'd helped. It was William who suggested they also offer it preventatively, for healthcare workers who hadn't hit crisis point yet but were heading there. An ounce of prevention, he said with a smile. After Dr. Chen left, William stayed behind. He looked at Rachel with an expression she'd learned to recognize as pride. What? She asked, smiling. You're a natural at this, he said. The way you listened to her, immediately understood the need, started problem solving. This is exactly what I hoped for when I met you. I'm just doing what makes sense, Rachel said, but she felt herself blushing. That's the gift, William replied. You see what needs to be done and you do it. No bureaucracy, no committee meetings to discuss whether we should discuss it. Just action, just help. He paused, his expression growing more serious. I have something else to discuss with you. Another project. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Should I be nervous? Maybe a little, William said with a slight smile. I've been thinking about Joe's diner. What about it? Frank's been talking about selling. The building needs repairs he can't afford and he's tired. I'd like to buy it. Rachel felt her stomach drop. Why? To give it to you, William said simply. Not to run, you're too busy with the foundation. But to own. To preserve. That place is where everything changed for both of us. It seems fitting that you should have it. William, Rachel protested. You can't just keep giving me things. Watch me, he said with a stubborn set to his jaw that reminded her he hadn't built an empire by being passive. Besides, I'm not giving it to you free and clear. There's a condition. What condition? That Danny gets to manage it. He's been working there longer than anyone, and he deserves a chance to run something of his own. You'd own it, he'd operate it, and we'd renovate it properly. Fair wages for everyone, good benefits, the whole thing. Rachel felt tears pricking her eyes again. She seemed to cry a lot these days, but they were good tears now. You're going to make me sob in my office. I'll get you tissues, William said, pulling out a handkerchief. Is that a yes? It's a yes, Rachel said, taking the handkerchief and dabbing at her eyes. But on one condition of my own. Name it. You let me buy you coffee there every week. Real coffee, that I really pay for with my own money. Because even though I don't need to anymore, I want to. I want to keep that tradition going. William's eyes grew shiny with emotion. I would be honored. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who'd found each other at exactly the right time. Rachel thought about that first day, how close she'd come to just taking William's order and moving on with her life. How one small choice had created ripples that were still spreading. William, she said softly, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you think your wife would be proud of all this? Of what you're doing? William was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I think she'd be proud of you. And I think she'd be happy that I finally figured out what really matters. It took me too long, but I got there eventually. Better late than never, Rachel said gently. Indeed, William agreed. Better late than never. As the afternoon sun slanted through the office windows, Rachel looked at the stack of applications waiting for her review. Hundreds of people, all hoping for help, all deserving of kindness. She thought about Betty and the other healthcare workers they'd helped. She thought about Dr. Chen's proposal for mental health services. She thought about Danny getting his chance to run the diner. And she thought about William, this man who'd disguised himself as someone in need to find genuine human connection, and how he'd found it in the most unlikely place. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness planted the biggest seeds. And this particular seed was growing into something beautiful. 1 year later, Rachel stood in front of a newly renovated Joe's Diner, watching Danny unlock the doors for the grand reopening. The building looked completely different. Fresh paint, new windows, updated kitchen equipment. But the sign still said, Joe's Diner, because some things were worth keeping the same. Inside, the booths had been reupholstered, the floors replaced, everything cleaned and modernized. But Danny had insisted on keeping the corner booth by the window exactly as it was, cracked vinyl and wobbly table included. He'd even put up a small plaque on the wall next to it. This is where kindness changed everything. May we never forget to see people for who they are, not what they appear to be. Rachel ran her fingers over the words, remembering that first day. It felt like a lifetime ago and yesterday all at once. You getting sentimental on me? Danny called from behind the counter. He wore a crisp new manager's shirt, and Rachel had never seen him look so proud. Maybe a little, she admitted. This place means a lot to me. Means a lot to all of us, Danny replied. You ready for the breakfast rush? I have a feeling we're going to be packed. He was right. By 7 a.m., every table was full. The neighborhood had turned out in force to support the diner's reopening. But Rachel noticed something else too. Sitting at various tables were people she recognized from foundation applications, healthcare workers they'd helped over the past year, all there to celebrate the place where it all began. William arrived at 8, right on schedule. He'd insisted on keeping their Tuesday morning coffee tradition, though now they met at different places depending on his travel schedule and her classes. But today was special, so of course he was at the diner. Rachel had his coffee ready before he even sat down in their corner booth. She slid into the seat across from him, something that would have gotten her in trouble a year ago but was perfectly fine now since she owned the place. How does it feel? William asked, gesturing around at the crowded diner. Surreal, Rachel admitted. Good surreal, but still surreal. I keep expecting to wake up and find out I'm late for a shift. William chuckled. I know that feeling. Sometimes I still wake up thinking I need to get to the office even though I've been retired for years. How's the traveling been? Rachel asked. William had spent the last few months visiting other cities, meeting with business leaders about starting similar foundations in their communities. Exhausting but rewarding, he said. We have commitments from groups in 8 cities now. They want to replicate what we're doing here. The Rachel Mitchell model, they're calling it. Rachel shook her head, still uncomfortable with having her name attached to everything. It's your money making it possible, William. It should be the William Thornton model. Money is just money, William replied. You're the one who made it mean something. Every person we've helped, that's because of your heart, your judgment, your compassion. I just wrote the checks. A young woman approached their table hesitantly. She was in scrubs, clearly on her way to or from a shift. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said nervously. But are you Rachel Mitchell? Yes, Rachel said, standing up. Can I help you? You already did, the woman said, her eyes filling with tears. 3 months ago, you paid off my husband's medical bills. He had a heart attack and we were drowning. I was working triple shifts and we still couldn't keep up. Then your foundation helped us and I got my life back. I got to actually be present with my kids again instead of constantly stressed and exhausted. She pulled Rachel into a tight hug. Thank you. Thank you so much. You saved my family. Rachel hugged her back, blinking away her own tears. I'm so glad we could help. How's your husband doing? Much better. He's back at work part-time and we're managing. But more than that, I'm better. I didn't realize how much the stress was affecting my nursing until it was gone. I'm a better caregiver now because I'm not drowning anymore. After the woman left, Rachel sat back down, wiping her eyes. This happened sometimes, people recognizing her and wanting to say thank you. It never got old, see what I mean? William said softly. Money didn't do that. You did. The day passed in a happy blur. Rachel had to leave after lunch to get to class, but she promised Danny she'd stop by later. Nursing school was harder than she'd expected, but in a good way. She loved learning about anatomy and patient care, loved the clinical rotations where she got to actually help people. Her professors knew about the foundation, and some of them had started referring students who were struggling financially. Just last week, Rachel had approved assistance for a nursing student who'd been about to drop out because she couldn't afford both rent and textbooks. Now she'd graduate on time, and someday she'd help countless patients because someone helped her first. After class, Rachel stopped by the foundation office. Her assistant Linda looked up with a smile. Good timing. We just got an interesting call. Oh yeah? Rachel dropped her backpack and grabbed the message slip. Local news wants to do a story on the foundation's 1-year anniversary. They want to interview you and Mr. Thornton. Rachel groaned. Do we have to? You know I hate that stuff. You hate publicity, but you love helping people, Linda pointed out. And stories like this inspire other people to help too. Remember that donation we got last month from the retired doctor who saw your interview in the paper? That's funding 3 grants. She had a point. Rachel had learned that visibility was part of the job, even if it made her uncomfortable. Okay, fine, set it up, but nothing too fancy. That evening, Rachel went home to her new apartment. Not too big, not too fancy, but nicer than her old place with its leaky faucet and noisy neighbors. She'd been careful not to go overboard. Yes, William had given her more money than she'd ever imagined having, but she'd grown up with nothing, and that taught you to be careful. Most of the money sat untouched except for school expenses and reasonable living costs. Rachel had plans for it, though. She wanted to start a scholarship program eventually, something to help kids from struggling families go to college, but that was a project for after she finished nursing school. Her phone buzzed with a text from William. "Tomorrow lunch? I have something to discuss with you." Rachel smiled and typed back, "Should I be nervous?" "Only a little," came the reply with a winking emoji. William had recently discovered emojis and used them with the enthusiasm of someone who just learned a new language. The next day, they met at a quiet restaurant downtown. William had that look on his face that Rachel had learned meant he was planning something. "Okay," she said as soon as they sat down. "What are you plotting?" William laughed. "Am I that transparent?" "To me, yes." "Spill it." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of a building. "This is a closed medical clinic in the East Side neighborhood. The previous owners retired and it's been sitting empty for 6 months." "Okay," Rachel said slowly. And I want to buy it and turn it into a free clinic for healthcare workers and their families. A place where nurses, EMTs, home health aides, all the people who spend their lives caring for others, can come for their own medical needs without worrying about cost." Rachel stared at the photo, her mind racing. "That's brilliant." "It gets better," William continued, clearly excited. "I've been talking to Dr. Chen and some of her colleagues. They're willing to volunteer time there. We'd also hire some full-time staff, offer everything from basic checkups to mental health services to dental care." "William, that's going to cost a fortune." "I have a fortune," he replied simply. "What good is it doing anyone sitting in investments? This way it feeds families, prevents burnout, keeps good people healthy so they can keep helping others." Rachel shook her head in wonder. "You're really something, you know that?" "I learned from the best," William said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "A young woman who taught me that the best investment isn't in stocks or real estate. It's in people." They spent lunch planning out the clinic, Rachel's nursing knowledge proving useful in thinking through what services would be most needed. By the time they finished, they had the skeleton of a plan that would change hundreds of lives. Walking back to her car later, Rachel passed a small coffee shop. Through the window, she saw an elderly woman counting change at the counter, clearly short on what she needed for her order. The barista was shaking his head, pointing at the total. Without thinking, Rachel walked in. "I've got it," she said, pulling out her card. "Whatever she wants." The elderly woman turned, surprised and grateful. "Oh, honey, you don't have to do that." "I want to," Rachel said firmly. "Someone did it for me once and it changed my life. Just passing it forward." She paid for the woman's coffee and a muffin, then left before the woman could thank her too much. As she walked to her car, her phone rang. It was Linda from the office. "Rachel, you're not going to believe this. We just got an anonymous donation. $1 million with a note that just says, 'Inspired by your kindness.'" Rachel stopped walking, standing still on the sidewalk. $1 million. That could fund 200 grants. Maybe more if they were careful. "That's incredible," she managed to say. "There's more," Linda continued. "The local hospital system called. They want to partner with us to create a financial wellness program for their staff. They'll match our donations dollar for any of their employees we help." Rachel felt that familiar tightness in her throat that meant tears were coming. "Set up a meeting. Let's make it happen." That night, Rachel sat at her kitchen table doing homework for her pharmacology class, but her mind kept wandering to everything that had happened. 1 year ago, she'd been an exhausted waitress wondering if she'd ever get out from under her debt. Now she was helping hundreds of people, going to nursing school and watching kindness ripple out in ways she never could have predicted. Her phone buzzed with a text from William. "Proud of you. Sleep well." "Proud of you too," she typed back. "Thanks for everything." "Thank you for seeing me," came his reply. "Not the money or the name, just me. That's the gift I'll never forget." Rachel smiled, setting down her phone. She thought about that first day in the diner, about the elderly man in the worn jacket who'd forgotten his wallet. She thought about the choice she'd made, the simple choice to be kind. Kindness wasn't complicated. It didn't require wealth or status or special skills. It just required seeing people, really seeing them, and choosing to help when you could. That's what William had taught her by testing humanity and finding it in her. That's what she tried to teach everyone through the Foundation's work. That's what she'd keep doing for the rest of her life, whether she had William's resources or was back to counting pennies, because in the end, the size of the gift didn't matter nearly as much as the size of the heart behind it. Rachel closed her textbook and looked out her window at the city lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, people she'd helped were sleeping better tonight. Healthcare workers who could focus on their patients instead of their bills. Families who'd been given a second chance, and somewhere, a lonely old man who'd lost faith in humanity had found it again, all because someone chose kindness over indifference. As Rachel got ready for bed, she made a promise to herself. No matter how busy she got, no matter how much her life changed, she'd never forget where she came from. She'd never stop seeing people the way William had taught her to see them, not for what they could do for her, but for who they were. The next morning, Rachel woke early and drove to Joe's diner before class. William was already there, sitting in their corner booth, 2 coffees waiting. "You're early," he said as she slid in across from him. "Couldn't sleep," Rachel admitted, too excited about the clinic project. They talked through plans over coffee and toast just like they had dozens of times before. 2 people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment, who'd saved each other in ways that couldn't be measured in money. Danny came over to refill their cups. "You two are always scheming something," he said with a grin. "Guilty," William replied, "though I prefer to call it dreaming." "Dream big," Danny said approvingly. "This place is proof that good things happen when good people care." After William left for a board meeting, Rachel stayed a few extra minutes, sitting in the booth where everything had changed. She ran her hand over the cracked vinyl, remembering the scared, exhausted woman she'd been a year ago. That woman would never have believed this could be her life. But here she was, living proof that one moment of kindness could change everything. She thought about all the people who'd walked past William that day when he'd been testing humanity. The ones who'd ignored him, dismissed him, looked through him like he was invisible. They had no idea what they'd missed, but Rachel had seen him. She'd chosen kindness, and that choice had created ripples that were still spreading, touching more lives every single day. As she left the diner and headed to class, Rachel made a silent vow. She'd spend the rest of her life creating those ripples, one act of kindness at a time, one person helped at a time, one heart opened at a time, because in the end, that's what mattered. Not the money, not the recognition, not even the success of the foundation. What mattered was remembering that every person you meet is carrying a story you know nothing about. And the simple choice to be kind might be the thing that saves them. It had saved William. It had saved her. And together they'd save as many others as they possibly could. That was enough. That was everything.